Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.
Oh, 4. Yeah.
It's all good. Oh, this one's called Babies. Aw.
Oh, yes. Okay, there's my baby.
Okay, so this photo is there are two people sitting on the sidewalk. This could only be in Canada because the lawn is nice and on the sort of the two people seated, but around them you could just see this nice grass, June grass, maybe July grass.
Yep.
And there's some dandelions, so it's a little bit of yellow splashes here and there. In the background, there's somebody set up a table with a speaker and maybe a mixing table. It's kind of peculiar. The two people standing at a laptop. Maybe they're mixing tunes. Hard to tell. Two people are seated on the ground. There's a young boy. I don't know how old he would be. Probably maybe about 4 or 5. 3? Okay, 3.
3.
Okay. And seated next to the boy is I don't know who that is. Who would that be?
That would be my kid. My
Okay,
16-year-old.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Nice.
So that is my 16-year-old and my grandson.
Okay.
So it was June. It might have even been May, actually. But
Okay.
it's a recent photo, and we're at a vendor event. So that's why the table, and they were playing music, and there was different tables set up. But Adrian, my grandson, he wanted to sit down and play with his Mr. Potato Head that he had bought. And so Lev went and sat with him so that me and my mom could kind of look at some more of the other things.
Oh, that's great. So here's, okay. I'm going to let you explain why do you want to use this photograph? And I'm making connections that I want to jump into right away, but I'm going to let you take the ball.
So I love this picture. It's very sweet of them. And it's a nice picture, but they mean the world to me, right?
Yep.
So Adrian, my grandson, I always tell him, like, you're the light of my life. Grammy just loves you. And he's just so sweet. He actually says sometimes, he'll go, Grandpa, I don't love you. And we're like, why? He goes, because I love Grammy. We're like, can't you love both of us? No. Right? Every so often he'll be like, yeah, I love you, Grandpa. But really, he's always, I love you, Grammy. I miss you, Grammy. And so I adore him. And then my 16-year-old, he's just in that picture. He's being so responsible too, looking out for his nephew, and they love hanging out together. Sometimes when Adrian comes over, he'll be like, Uncle Levin, I want to play in your room. And so they'll go off and play in Lev's room.
Nice.
Watch movies and stuff. So they're just so sweet together. And again, it's all that togetherness and family and fun. Clearly
important values for you. Okay, so where I was going to jump into with this sort of thing is, okay, so I was listening to this podcast. I don't remember his name. He's a neuroscientist, and Mr. Potato Head, right? So there's this idea of this hypothesis or theory about what our brains are like, and our brains are basically these things that are really good at having sensory inputs plugged into them, right? So for example, our fingers send back like signals that our brains go, okay, that's touch, got it. And our eyes send back signals that our brain go, oh, okay, that's like visual stimulus, got it. But you can create machines now that send back electrical signals. So for example, if somebody's like amputated, that the brain gets these electrical signals to say, oh, okay, well, this thing that it's a machine, it's sort of like a brain is just an amazing thing for converting signals into sensory information, right? And so the theory is like the Mr. Potato Head theory of brains. So how would you connect that in terms of your experience of growing, of writing, of thinking about the world, and converting sensory information as a Mr. Potato Head theory of thinking or of sensory, and then in terms of what you can connect with your son or your grandson or your own life?
Yeah. So I think particularly because I write a lot of nonfiction, all of that sensory input that I've experienced goes into my writing. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the sensory input into this last book that we talked about, Goodbye Too Soon, there was a lot of sadness, a lot of anger, a lot of grief, a lot of guilt, and that is a lot of emotions. And seeing my brother, before he died, and then seeing him in the casket, um, it
Oh,
was
wow.
very difficult. And so to bring that all back up afterwards, I think because my brain had been through therapy to help me make sense of all of these various sensory inputs from previous incidents in my life, it
Mm-hmm.
my brain was at a place that it was able to then cope with what was happening and put it in a manageable manner.
Yeah.
Whereas when bad things first happened, so I've shared this before, so this is not new. But my stepfather was an alcoholic and very emotionally, verbally abusive. So at
Mm-hmm.
the time when those things were happening, when I was a teenager, my brain didn't know how to wire that sensory input,
Yeah.
how to wire the what I was hearing, what I was seeing, what I was feeling. Like they didn't know how to wire all of that. So I had to work through and I guess untangle,
Mm-hmm.
take all the potato head pieces and put them back where they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And now when those traumatic experiences happen, my potato head isn't falling apart. It might take a little bit of tape to push it all back together, but it's
Mm.
able to then, figure it out. And to bring that back to my kid and my grandson, I think for my son, anyways, it's a really big deal because so much of what I've had to learn with him is things that I never knew before.
Yeah, of course.
Right? And I mean, just as being a parent, I never really knew, but also the autism and different coping strategies and things like that I've had to learn. And then becoming a grandma so very young, I
Mm-hmm.
was like blindsided and had to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Um, and so the brain, like you said, it's an amazing thing and it can really help us or it can really hurt us.
Sure. Yeah. So you're a grandmother and you say really young. I mean, you're really young to be a grandmother. I mean, full
I was a
on.
grandma at 32.
Yeah. Amazing. But you look like you're in your early 20s. Oh.
Yeah.
No, but and so okay, so in the same way that life, you really loved cats and then all of a sudden you needed to learn how to be a dog person and
Hmm.
understand the dog brain.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Can you describe, because like putting a book out into the world is an act of stimulus and response. Like you're, in a way, you want to stimulate other brains out there to kind of go through the words and then respond in a way that for them elevates or makes their lives easier or whatever. So can you mention, like, even though your book's only been out for a month, has there been a kind of a signal from the world to say to you, okay, you kind of hit a nerve?
Yes. So I've had a few people read it and give reviews. And actually, my editor, when she read it first, she was like, I had to have tissues. It was so sad. And then others, as they've read it after it's now come out, have said it was very emotional, very touching. And people that have known my brother have read it and said, "Oh my goodness, you hit the nail on the head with this," because it is about Brandon, but it is also about family members because it's from my perspective. So family members of somebody with an addiction and
Mm.
how that person is first and foremost a person, even
Yeah,
though
of
we have
course.
had difficulties with them. But in the media and in society, a lot of times we don't realize that they're a person. We don't realize that they have family members who miss them and love them.
Hmm.
And then I go into a little bit of research, risk factors of developing it and the DSM-5 and things like that. So it was actually funny. My brother's ex-girlfriend, who they stayed friends with, she's the mom of two of his kids, and her mom had never liked Brandon.
Hmm.
Really, really disliked him.
Yeah.
But even she said that the book made her emotional. And
Yeah.
so when my brother's ex had told me that, she goes, you know how much my mom didn't like him. And even she was emotional. She said it was good.
Mm-hmm,
And I was like, okay, that actually means something to me because, the fact that she read it alone meant something.
Yep. Okay, so is it, because this is territory that I'm looking at it now. So in terms of his addiction and in terms of the stigma and the difficulties around that, like, what would you, like, is talking about his, like, what his addiction was focused around, be it alcohol or drugs or whatever it is, like, drugs. So drugs. So do you feel that that's an important part of his story or important part of your story, or what is the important part of the story?
I think the most important part of the story is that realizing that people with an addiction, like I said, are first and foremost people. And as the family member, realizing that it's really okay if you have to take a step back and put boundaries in place. That is the main message of that book. But I do think that it's important to recognize that there are different types of addictions that affect people differently.
For sure.
Because say a shopping addiction, it exists, but the likelihood of it killing you is much lower than an addiction to drugs. It can affect your life greatly. You can go into severe debt. You can lose relationships. You can be divorced, things like that. But the likelihood of death is much lower.
Right.
It doesn't mean that addiction is, worse or better or whatever. It's different. And I think that's what's important. And so for Brandon, his addiction was drugs. He did drink, but the addiction was really more the drugs. And understanding when you're doing drugs, especially right now where I am, fentanyl is a massive killer.
Right.
And realizing that drugs are now laced with things that you don't know what they are.
Sure. Hooah. Okay. Randi-Lee. Vacation together. Babies. And your book. So the title of your book, again, is Gone Too Soon?
Goodbye Too Soon.
Goodbye Too Soon. Really great to talk to you. Any last bit? Okay, so the people who are going through it are going to feel alone or going to feel isolated. Maybe, not potentially. So what can you give a listener as a kind of like from the previous guest, a nugget of hope? Like, what can you give a person as a nugget of hope to kind of inspire them beyond getting your book to get through the day?
So you're not alone, first off, obviously, because you've now listened to this episode and you know that. And you don't have to feel bad for choosing yourself. It is not selfish to do so. It is potentially a way to save yourself much heartache and potentially save yourself from a disaster. It's not to say that you don't love that person, but choosing yourself is very important. This is why on airplanes, they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first before 100%. You help somebody else.
100%.
So I think that is the biggest nugget of hope. You're not alone and you can choose yourself.
Randi-Lee Bowslough. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me again.
You're such a bright star, bright light. Oh, so great.
Thanks.
Okay, well, enjoy your... Look, you know what? Since a holiday and a vacation is just a mindset, may you forever be on vacation. I grant you this.
I love it.
Okay. Okay, thanks so much. Okay, bye.
Bye.
So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.